Wholeness and welcome. This is Josh of Integrating Presence. And today I have Magic Barkley with me. Magic, how's it going today?
Yeah, really good, and I'm so glad to be here.
Well, good. And, people that are familiar with this, I usually throw it back to you, and this is no exception to introduce yourself. And if you could, I'm curious about that name. I'm sure you get the comments quite a bit, would be my guess. This
Yeah.
word magic as a first name. So who's Magic Barkley and what does she, I guess, do? Yeah.
Yeah, Magic Barclay is a mum and a business owner and a practitioner and an avid permaculture gardener, a mum of cats. But most of all, Magic is a person who had to find herself. And I guess that was a big part of my journey in my health and continues to be so with such a world that's gone crazy, is really knowing who I am. And something my grandfather said once was, I named you Magic for a reason, live up to it. And so I just remind myself of that when, I just feel like I'm not quite grabbing that spark of life and I'm not present in life. I remember what he said and I try and live up to my name.
Well, very cool. And so your work though, now what kind of work do you do? I know you do other things besides just domestic type things, right? I mean, would
Yeah,
that be fair to say? Yeah.
very true. So I'm the lead practitioner at Holistic Natural Health Australia. So we're a small group of practitioners. We use herbs, we use essential oils, we use some supplementation, but what we do is we treat root cause of illness. So we're usually the last port of call when people have seen all the medical professionals and the naturopaths and the whoever else they've seen, and they've been chasing symptoms for a while. We don't do that. We take the symptoms into account because they're whispers of the body, but we really do go after root cause and make all the systems make sense to people. So, something that I've been told so many times is no system works alone and the body has no reason to make any sense to you whatsoever. We're the ones that help you understand exactly what your body's doing and comprehend the pathways around changing it. Outside of that, I also do my own podcast, A Magical Life, Health, Wealth, and Weight Loss. So, very, very busy.
Well, very cool. So let's jump into this relief and getting to the root. What's the difference? Because most, I would say, Western medicine is kind of focused on relief and treating symptoms. I'm pretty sure most people that would be listening to this are already up on that. So you can go into that. And how do you get to the root of things? What do you do that might be different, or just in general, what other kind of more holistic practitioners do in general to really get to the root of, I guess, illness, if that's the right word to use.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of questions wrapped up into one. Let's take this step by step. So, what is the difference between relief and root cause? If you chase symptoms and just seek relief from those symptoms, you're not addressing what has caused them, hence root cause. When we look at root cause, another part of your question, what is that? It's looking through the history. It's not just what happened in the past 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 days, whatever. It's what happened in your whole lifetime. What happened before you were born? What happened when you were born? What happened during your childhood? What happened during your teens? Every little step will add up. And, more often than not, when we're doing our free call, which is our root cause analysis, I'll ask people, they've got 37 pages of history that they give me. A 37-page questionnaire is what they get. And I'll say, but what happened between this year and this year? And they're like, nothing. Yes, something happened because this is what happened there, and then this is what happened there, and there's a gap. And so I'll suggest things, and I go, oh, that's right. I did get a cold sore, or I did have a UTI, or I wasn't well that year, or, so I'll know what's in those gaps. And that's because I'm looking at I guess, the synchronicity of the body and how it's all working, and that history will tell me what's needed. So what differs between us and allopathic medicine and some natural therapies is that we're working holistically. Now, that's holistically with a W, and as is our name, and that is because we're treating with holism. So, holism versus reductionism. Many professionals treat with reductionism. If I just reduce these symptoms to being that possible cause, or that possible organ, or that possible pathway, therefore I should be able to fix it. Holism is the opposite. It is, okay, here's the symptoms that you've come with, here's the organ that comes from, here's the pathway that comes from, but what is working behind that? What is working with that? So holism is treating the body as a whole, all 13 systems, including your limbic system, which is your emotional center of your brain. And reductionism is saying, well, that's a liver problem, so let's just treat the liver. So there's the difference between that. I hope I answered all of those bits of the question.
Yes, you did. So I guess the next thing, it seems like, to me, it seems like there's two major divisions or categories in this. It's what's coming from the external, the environmental factors, either be it people. I know you're big into mold, it looks like. I mean, it should say, addressing mold and how to get rid of it, which I would like to ask you about. All these different environmental factors, be it poisons in the environment, maybe even toxic people. And then there's the other side would be internally, like, how are we viewing what's happening to us and how are we responding? What is the narrative we tell ourselves? How do we show ourselves self-care mentally, emotionally, maybe even psychically? How we're feeling inside, and how we respond to that, and the relationship we have with both the internal and the external. Do you find it helpful to look at things this way? And then also there's sometimes these lines get blurred too, right? Sometimes maybe it might make more sense to draw these distinctions, and sometimes maybe not. So I guess let's just start there. Yeah.
So when we're looking at toxins, when we're looking at chemical reactions, we can, in science, call them exogenous or endogenous. So one is outside, one is inside. Now, when we're looking at a cellular level, this also happens. So we have intracellular, which is between the cells, or extracellular, so from outside the cells. We have this with hormones and with, well, pretty much anything. So we can have self and non-self. And this also relates to our thoughts and our feelings and, what we make things mean. So a self factor is of yourself. A non-self factor could be pathogenic. It could be someone else's fears put upon you. It could be, family history from your mother, your grandmother, great-grandmother, and you've never met them, and all of a sudden you've got that internal history, that internal dialogue. So right through science, we see this pretty much from within and from without. And, when we're only treating one, we can really cause more problems because one will affect the other, and that one will affect vice versa. So we have to look holistically at everything, whether it be at a cellular level, at an emotional level, spiritual level, physical level, external level, like absolutely everything. And sometimes, yes, one can sway the other, and sometimes they can have a knock-on effect. So, little things like, I don't know, I've addressed my dislike for people wearing blue, for example. I don't know where it's come from, but I've worked on that. This is just an example. And, I don't know anything past that. But am I looking at why I dislike people wearing blue? No. Where's that come from? Is it coming from a fear? Is it coming from a memory? Is it coming from an inherited fear or memory? Is it coming from when I ate something I had an allergic reaction and someone wearing blue walked past me? Was I wearing blue if I ate something that I had an allergic reaction? Or maybe I got stung by a bee. Like, the body and the mind is so complex that we just can't discount any part of that, really.
Yeah, and the mind is very powerful and can be very subtle as well. And it seems everything happens in the mind before it gets into the physical world. So yeah, of utmost importance here. Now, one of the things I see that all my kind of spiritual karate moves don't really work on is trauma. And I mean, if we just have a human form, we've experienced some kind of trauma, and then it just goes up from there. Some people have really severe trauma. And then there's other people who can look at someone else and say, well, that's not very traumatic. But for the other person, it can be very traumatic. So you talk about on your site, the PNEI of trauma. Could you mention what that is? And then just about trauma in general, because I feel it's really of utmost importance. I mean, yeah, especially now, maybe for all time, I don't know. And especially when we're working with the body, how important the body is when it comes to working with trauma.
Sure. So what the PNEI is the Neuro Endo Immunology of trauma. Now, I read about this when I was reading When the Body Says No by Dr. Gabor Mate. And he mentioned it, and I thought, well, this is really interesting. I need to, deep dive research into this. And it led me to actually write a practitioner's course about this. And I'm going to give you an example. And that is, maybe one of your listeners has been told one day they need to talk to 35,000 people. Okay, they don't like talking to 35,000 people. They've told themselves that. So the P is something bad is going to happen. You can't do this. You shouldn't do this. Don't do this. Now, this could be stemming from maybe they were, in grade school, elementary school, and they went to give a talk in front of the class and someone, I don't know, threw a spitball at them or something. Like, it could be just something really simple. It could be when they were maybe 3 and they wanted to speak up and they were told, be quiet, sit down, you're 3, we're not listening to you. Could be something that had absolutely nothing to do with what they're doing now professionally. And, here they are, being asked to give a talk to 35,000 people. And so all these thoughts and feelings and emotions come up. So this is the P. This is your psychos. This is all of your brain trying to keep you safe. Now, you really want to do this talk. It's a really big deal. So you ignore the psycho and N comes in, the neuro. You start to get like tingly fingers, or maybe you can't feel your feet, or maybe you start getting back pain or knee pain or, something. And you think, what's going on? Well, this is your nervous system trying to slow you down to keep you safe. Don't give the talk or you won't be safe. Okay, but you ignore that because this is a big deal. And this can all happen in a matter of minutes, by the way. Then the E comes in. This is your endocrine system. So this is when you start feeling, hot and sweaty and clammy. You might feel dizzy. You might feel nauseous. And this is your endocrine system trying to keep you safe by giving you a rush of hormones or a rush of adrenaline or, any chemical rush to try and stop you from giving the talk. Now, remember, this could be stemming from something really simple and many, many years ago. Okay? And then it comes the day of the talk, and you wake up and you've got no voice. Or maybe your nose is running, your eyes are puffy, maybe your skin's itchy and you just, can't stop scratching, you get hives. Maybe you just get out of breath, like exercise-induced asthma kind of deal. Maybe anything like that is happening. And this is the I, this is the immune system jumping in. So the immune system's listen to what the brain has said, listen to what the nervous system has said, listen to what the endocrine system has said. And now it's saying, you must be safe. I'm not going to let you go on stage because we have to keep you alive. This is a threat to your survival. Now, if you push through that and you've dealt with all of that, I'm not saying ignore it, but dealt with all of that over the time and spent this time on healing, this pathway won't kick in. But if you haven't, then that I, the big dog on a block, is going to stop you, and you are not going to be able to give that talk. Or if you do, you'll be clearing your throat every 5 seconds, grabbing for the water bottle, eyes running, nose running, out of breath, whatever it is. And, this is all to keep you safe. So the PNEI system is an amazing pathway. It's a set of some of the biggest systems of the body that we have. And all they're doing is keeping you safe. Now, I mentioned this could come from something as simple as an offhand comment when you were 3. Could come from something in grade school. It could come from maybe you gave a talk in high school. I'm not sure what that is over in the US. But, it could be something that you made mean something. And so that stuck with you. It could even be perceived. No one said anything, no one did anything, but you thought it was something. And that fear could have been stemming, as I said earlier, from something that's not even yours. It could be something that's your mother's or your grandmother's, anything. Because as you are forming in utero, you are getting all these experiences. You're getting all these downloads from previous generations. So this is why this system is so important.
Well, that's beautiful and very helpful. So how do you suggest people work with this? It seems obvious to me that system is honored, like you stress very clearly and effectively, that is there for safety, not to throw us off keel and prevent us from doing anything we're meant to be doing, right? It's there for our safety. And so, how do people meet this and address this and work with this, work on it? What's the response here?
Look, the first thing you have to do is honor your memories, your thoughts, your feelings, your assumptions, your implications, whatever you want to call it. And don't ever throw away your gut instinct or something that your body's telling you. I'm not saying run in fear from what your body's telling you or what your brain's telling you, but it's coming from somewhere. We don't make these things up. It's come from somewhere. Address that. I, for many, many years, felt like a second-class citizen in my family. In fact, till very recently, and I'm in my 50s now. And, it was something that really affected my whole life. And it wasn't until I actually faced my mother and I said, hey, this is what I remember. This is what happened. She had no memory of it because it didn't mean anything to her. But she acknowledged, okay, I think maybe, you've been hung up on this all your life. It's tripped you up in several places. Maybe it's real. And so then I did some work on myself with that. And I went, why is this still affecting me now? What is it? And it is because I didn't feel safe when I was young. So really look at why you feel things, why you think things. That P is so important. And just to give you an idea, we actually have 3 parts of our brain. So we have at the base of our brain is our reptilian brain. Okay, this is where everything is scanning everything every second of our lives. So I'm sitting here in my office now talking to you. I've got bookshelves over on the walls behind, opposite me and behind me. And my brain, my reptilian brain, is thinking, what if those books fly off the shelves? What if the shelves fall on her? What if the microphone blows up? What if the computer blows up? Like, something could happen. Is this safe? So it's constantly scanning every moment. It's scanning the room temperature. It's scanning any fumes that might be in a room. And we don't realize this is doing it. It's doing it at a very unconscious level. Okay? That, I guess, interprets our gut instinct. So, sometimes you just get that feeling, don't shake that person's hand, don't walk across the street, don't do something, it's not safe. That's our reptilian brain. Now, the reptilian brain then feeds information to the central part of our brain called the limbic system. This is where thoughts, feelings, and emotions come through. And I mentioned this earlier. So this is really the driving factor of that P, the psycho from PNEI. And this is where something's happened. Maybe it doesn't feel safe. Maybe our body is just giving us the tingles and the shakes when we see a certain person, like don't go near them, and we make it mean something. Now, it doesn't stop there. It goes to the third part of the brain, which is the logical brain. This is where we make the hypothesis about the safety basis and about the emotional basis. And that might be, let's go back to the person. Sometimes you get like the hairs stand up on the back of your neck when you meet someone and you're like, I don't want to like them. I don't know what it is. I don't want to be near them. So the logical brain then says, well, you didn't feel safe. Your brain didn't feel safe. And now it's telling you you're not going to like them, and there's a reason. I don't know what it is, but you're not going to. So now I'm going to make this logical leap to say that person is going to be bad for me. There doesn't have to be evidence right now, but there will be evidence. So therefore, I'm going to avoid them. Now imagine seeing that person over and over and over. You are now gathering that evidence that logical brain said that you would. And that person does one thing wrong and you're like, yep, I knew it. That's it. There's that evidence I was looking for. Reptilian brain was right. Limbic brain was right. Now logical brain has just sealed the deal. And so it's really important to comprehend that the brain is so complex, but the thoughts and the logic and the feeling of safety, that doesn't stop there. That transfers to the rest of our body. So maybe you see that person 10 years down the track and all of a sudden you get a hot flash. And you're like, it's your endocrine system coming and going, remember, we've been through this. That person's unsafe. Doesn't matter what they say. It could be hello. And all of a sudden you're like, I can't be around this person. Or maybe your knee starts giving out. Okay, that's the N coming in. Well, maybe you just get all phlegmy in the throat. Okay, and this is the I again. So the PNEI is kicking back in to keep you safe.
All right, very helpful. Now, how this makes me wonder about now how we usually think about the immune system. I mean, if so, how does this? Well, one sec. Do I formulate this? Let's just talk about the immune system in general. Do you have any tips on how to keep it well balanced? What is a healthy immune system and how to get it that way, and how you address that as well, and maybe how that's relevant to what you just mentioned, and maybe does it seem to be different using that lens you just talked about? How does that affect how people normally think about the immune system, I guess?
Well, the immune system is a whole nother subject in itself. But just briefly, there's 5 parts of the immune system that we know of at the moment, and there's more being studied. And so the first one is your innate immune system. Now, this is the one that you're born with. This is also comprising all of your barriers. So it's your blood-brain barrier, your skin barrier, your digestive system, it's your gut lining. There's a whole lot going on there. Now, these are all parts of your body that came from the same line of cells called the embryonic line. So before you were a fetus, you were a line of cells, and that was the embryonic line. They start scattering out to make all these different parts of our body. They now make up your innate immune system. Now, you've got a few days when you come across a pathogen or something like that for the innate to work. This looks like a head cold, for example. For 3 days, you are full up in the head. You absolutely feel like death warmed up. But then you're out of the penalty box a few days later and everything's fine again. Now, if the innate immune system cannot handle what's coming its way, it calls in the acquired immune system. And so the first one you sit at is known as T regulation, or Th3. Now, imagine a conductor with his batons. Okay, this is Th3. So what happens is you get a pathogen, right? And you go to Th1. Th1 is catabolic. It breaks things down. It's breaking down that pathogen, and it breaks down collagen, and it breaks down muscle tissue. So if you get stuck there, what this is going to look like is you've got, a torn hamstring all the time, or lots of wrinkles before your time. Something like that will happen. You seem to always be fighting a pathogen. Now we want to go there and not get stuck there. So getting stuck there, I've just mentioned. What does healthy going to Th1 look like? It looks like the flu. When your body is fluing, flu is not something you can catch. When your body is fluing, it is trying to get rid of a toxicity. Now that could be endogenous or exogenous. Okay, we mentioned that earlier. So from inside or from outside. And so your body goes to Th1 to get rid of this. Then you jump back to Th3, so Mr. Neutral, right? And then say, ladies, you get pregnant, off to Th2 you go. And maybe you get a parasite, off to Th2 you go. Or maybe you have one of those V words, and I'm not going to say it, off to Th2 you go. And the reason is all these things drive Th2, which is anabolic building and nurturing. Let's look at the V word. If you inject something into your body and you don't go to Th2, but you go to Th1, you're going to wipe it out straight away. If you contract a parasite and you don't go to Th2, but you go to Th1, you're going to kill the parasite straight away. Right? So the parasite itself will drive Th2 so it can live in the host. Now, a pregnancy will do this too. So you're supposed to go to Th2 when you're in pregnancy. And if you don't, you'll miscarry. So Th1 people, ladies stuck in Th1, really struggle with pregnancy. Ladies that go to Th2 as they're supposed to, they're nurturing the baby. They're nurturing that fetus. Okay, but then we're supposed to jump back to Th3. We're back at the conductor. And the final immune type is called Th17. Now, this is very much like Th1. It's catabolic. It breaks things down. But now it's breaking down the innate immune system. So it's breaking down your skin barrier. So it looks like eczema and psoriasis. It's breaking down your gut lining. It looks like Crohn's. It's breaking down your blood-brain barrier. So it starts looking like MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. So that is a very nasty system to be stuck in. Before you get to all those nasty diseases, it might look like exercise-induced asthma, delayed onset allergies, really bad hay fever, hives, light eczema. So there's always warning signs. But what you really want to be doing is nurturing your innate immune system and Mr. Conductor Th3, T regulation, so that can send you to these other systems without getting stuck. Because once you're stuck, you now have autoimmune. So I mentioned the immune system was pretty amazing and complex, and it is. In answer to your question, how do you nurture an immune system? You have to listen to your body. You have to go, I have an allergy, that's a Th2 symptom. Why am I getting stuck there? I'm constantly sick, muscle tears, aches, pains. That's a Th1 symptom. Why am I getting stuck there? I'm now getting delayed onset allergies. I could, eat beef before and now I can't eat it. Why am I getting stuck there? So it's always the why, the root cause, that's just so important.
And you mentioned this towards the end there about autoimmune diseases. What would you say, isn't there kind of an explosion within the past, I don't know how many, 5, 10, 20, 30 years of autoimmune? Is there anything you can say to that, why that might be? And is there any kind of general information you can give people to address these?
Yeah, look, the main things I can say is we are a very toxic society. Very, very toxic. If you look at every other species on Earth, humans are the only ones that are poisoning themselves. The others all know, don't eat that, I'm going to get sick. Don't go near that, I'm going to get sick. Don't be a bad animal, I'm going to probably get killed by another one. Like, we don't find these cues. We're constantly hurting ourselves emotionally, physically, spiritually. And we are the only species that's doing that. I'm not saying other species don't get autoimmune, but not to the extent that we do. Why is it exploding? We are in such a toxic society. I live in a very low tox home. Right? We don't use any chemicals, but we have Wi-Fi. And I have lights on at the moment. And you know what? We have lights on in the house because we don't always go to bed at sundown. Those things alone are toxic. You find a lot of, these indigenous tribes and things like that, and explorers have gone to see them, and there's nothing wrong with them. Even when they're 80, they look like we do when we're 30. It's because they don't have all this toxic stuff around them, and they don't have toxic thoughts. They want to have a fight in the tribe, they go and get their spears or whatever, and they fight it out, and then it's over. Then they sit down to a meal together. They respect each other and they respect themselves. We don't do that. And so over the years, we've become a fear-based society. We've listened to our mainstream media. We've gone running from wars and, viruses and what is it now, fires, and there's all sorts of things. It's insert fear porn here. Like, it could be anything from one moment to the next. There's a lot of memes going around on social media. It's like, oh, I've got my war flags up. Hang on, I thought we were still on that disease. So there's a lot of jokes coming out about it now, but they couldn't be further from the truth. We have exploded with autoimmune because we live in fear and we live in toxicity. And I'm not bagging anyone's life out there. Like I said, I have Wi-Fi and I'm sitting here with lights on at the moment talking to you. But we really have to look at balance, and that is what is missing. Once we balance our lives and balance our thoughts and balance our emotions, balance the time between work and spending with loved ones, or playing with our pets, or walking barefoot in our gardens, once we find some balance our thoughts about ourselves, we're always going to have those moments as humans of beating ourselves up. I did it right before this. I had to rush and put some makeup on because I saw myself in the camera. And, so we all have these moments. But unless we find that balance, autoimmune is going to keep rising because we are just punishing ourselves without removing the irritant, the toxicity, the thought, the emotion, whatever it is.
Very good points. I couldn't really agree more. I might add too that, even if we think some of these steps are overwhelming, we don't have to do it all at once. Every little tiny step and choice can add up to make a difference. Drop by drop, a water bucket's filled. I mean, it started for me with just turning, or having my device or devices at some point, outside my room when I go to sleep. You could still hear it ring if you needed it or anything like that. Now, since I don't have to do that, stuff is all powered off at night, right? So there's shielding devices, just focusing on this type of thing. So what do we really need, and can we limit it? I mean, if we're limiting it just for 5 minutes a day, that will add up over time. So now I told my friends who have 2 small children, I wanted to ask you about some of the things that they're up against with their kids' health. They have a small, I guess their son is about maybe 5 or 6, and they've got him on a gluten-free diet, and that seems to help a lot of the food allergy he has is like his nose will run when he's not eating a lot of times gluten-free. Although I think what she said recently was that it has started doing that sometime. And same way with eating corn and corn syrup. And I know that there's a lot of GMO corn in the United States. And I wonder though if it does with non-GMO corn too. But also, it seems he does this with processed food too. And this just seems really obvious to me that processed food can cause that. But we're wondering we talked about these, this thing we dealt with the last few years, if any of that would play into this. And then, yeah, the other thing she asked too was, at what age do kids start having more independence, where they need to have less attention and like just, I guess, basic child rearing, if there's any different markers of ages on parental behavior. I don't have any kids myself, so but this is common, right? I have a niece and nephew, and there's only so much that I can do with that.
So when I was raising my children, I was the penultimate helicopter mum. Wouldn't let them do a thing because I had to do it for them to get it right, to make sure they had the benefit of it, all that kind of thing. And then I came across Montessori. And so from preschool, my two were in Montessori, and it's very child-led. So at Montessori, my little one who couldn't even walk, he was in a walking frame, he had a lot of health issues. They parked him at the table in the toddler room and they gave him a knife and an orange. And they said, this is how you cut an orange. And I freaked out. You're giving my 2.5-year-old a knife? Like, what the bleep? Helicopter mummy, I've got to do everything that could be possibly dangerous. And I watched for a little while. And he looked at the knife and he looked at the orange and he watched the teacher cut it and he went, I know how to do that. And so she said to him, look at the orange and look at how there's faint lines. Okay, so he's a little toddler, but he can understand English. There's faint lines. And first she got her thumbs in one and she pulled it apart and showed him that it comes in 4 segments. Then she gave him the knife and he cut down the lines. Lines that as adults we tend not to see. But these kids can pick it up, right? Because they're not poisoned by our fears and our thoughts and all that kind of thing too much yet. So he cuts this orange and then she said, okay, show me, give me the knife. And she showed him with someone else first, give me the knife, and they gave her the handle first and then he copied. And then she said, now enjoy your orange. Tell me what color it is. What does it taste like? What does it feel like? Pull it apart. Taste the pith. Taste the peel. Tell me about it. And so I was watching this really child-led education happening. And I realized me running around like helicopter mummy for the past few years has not helped him at all. I'm shielding him from learning. Maybe I should have let him crawl into the backyard and eat a bunch of dirt. And he would have gone, that's not so nice. I don't want to do that again. But no, I would run like, oh my God, he's about to put his hands in the dirt and he's going to put them in his mouth. So with parenting, it's very much, I'm not saying, hands off and let the kids do whatever, but allow them to learn and allow them to feel and allow them to express what they're learning and feeling. Allow them to observe. As a parent, you are the biggest role model your child will ever have. So make sure you're a good one. Give them something to observe and something to enjoy and learn from, because they're going to end up teaching their kids the next thing. Okay, so there's part of that. Now back to the gluten issue. Gluten's never a gluten problem, I have to say. It's a toxicity problem. Now, if you look at glutinous materials, they are the most pesticide-sprayed crops. Okay, they are the most GMO'd crops. So if we go back to when I was a child, 70s and 80s, if you'd said gluten was bad, people would have just laughed you out of town because things weren't as toxic as they are now. I have a few clients, they live in the wheat belt here in Australia, and there are a few new clients, and I'm doing my functional liver and lifestyle detox program with them. And the first thing I said was, I can't guarantee anything because of where you live. Not that I guarantee anything, but I said, whilst we're coming into end of winter, start of spring, all the crops are being sprayed, you're inhaling that. Even if you don't eat from those crops, you're inhaling it, you're absorbing it. It's particles in the air. And I get them to tell me what's been happening on the farms around their houses, and they're spraying nearly every single day. Now, this is wheat. This is going to go into those glutinous products. And all these people are going to tell me in the next few years how gluten intolerant they are. It's not so much gluten. It's the things that are binding to the gluten. So for a little kid that's becoming gluten intolerant, I would go on to all organic. I would start growing your own things. We grow an amazing substance here called amaranth. One of my sons bakes our bread. We grow the amaranth. It's never sprayed with anything. It's got companion plants around it. He harvests it, he grinds it and mills it, and he bakes from it. So we know that there's no pesticides apart from what's coming from the sky, but there's no other intentional pesticides on it. So the likelihood of it being bad for us is a lot less than if I bought a loaf of bread from the store. So there's that. Gluten intolerance has been on the rise, and I would dare say it is a toxicity issue, not always a protein issue, which gluten is a protein. Going gluten-free doesn't always solve the problem. First of all, gluten-free products can taste terrible, and they can be very hard to deal with. Not always, but they can. And your body will start to get used to those new grains and seeds and have a problem with those. Again, you're not addressing the root cause. You're chasing the symptom and the response, but not the root cause. Now, when it comes to corn, yes, a lot of it is GMO. So what I would say to the listeners is corn is super easy to grow in spring and summer. Absolutely fantastic. Great for kids to do. It's part of the Three Sisters. Plant it with squash and beans, and they'll all look after each other. And what you want to do is find some heirloom, non-GMO seeds and grow your own corn. Simple as that.
Yes, and this is what I recommended from the beginning is all organic because I'm fairly energetically sensitive, and living in the States in the Midwest, I notice a huge difference to where I'm at now in Denmark, where there's, as far as I know, there's very little GMO going on, and the organic stuff is fairly affordable, and it's more plentiful. I would say overall, as far as the grocery stores here, I notice a huge effect, and just overall energetically as well. And they have the blessing now of being in a rural area, and then they're starting to grow their own things too. And also they're into homeschooling and unschooling, even this unschooling movement. So they're still looking for guidance and groups and things like this. So I'll have to check back in and see how he's doing with the diet. So I think the other thing I wanted to just touch on here, I mentioned it at the beginning, is the mold thing. The mold toxicity. I know it's in different areas of the States more than others, perhaps, and in certain type of environments. What do people need to know about mold? And then I also want to get into maybe the endocrine system a little bit. I'm sorry, not the endocrine, the lymphatic system a little bit, because I don't think we've mentioned that. And I feel that's worth mentioning as well. I mean, these are huge topics here. So however you feel makes sense to address these two topics, please.
No problem. Well, let's talk about mold first. There are 37 known types of mold in the world. They are not all bad. But mold is known as the great suppressor and the great survivor. And it's used in modern medicine. It's also used in warfare. Can be good, can be bad, okay? But it's known as the great suppressor because we mentioned those 5 immune types before. They mean nothing when there's mold in play, particularly black mold, the worst of them. Okay, so it suppresses your immune system. Both levels, innate and adaptive, are acquired. And so you can't have a proper immune response. The mold is calling the shots now. And it does that so it gets what it needs. Now, I mentioned parasites earlier. They want to nurture, they want to build up with the host. They need a host to be alive to feed. Mold is the opposite. Mold is a fungus. Not all fungus are bad. Mold is in its own kind of category, and it doesn't care if the host is alive. So we've all had a basket of apples at some point. One's maybe got, a fingernail mark in it or something, and it's gone moldy. If you leave that moldy apple in the basket of beautiful, healthy, crisp-looking apples, before long the next one's going to get moldy, and the next one, and the next one. So once mold is finished with the original host, it moves on to the next one. It's a decomposer. Okay, so there's the distinction. Why is mold so prevalent in some parts of the world? Well, I mentioned toxic homes before. We also have airtight homes. So here in Australia, where I live, there's a big push to build these beautiful, pristine-looking homes that are airtight. Half the windows don't open. We're taught keep your windows closed in the middle of winter like it is here. You're going to get cold. Reduce the airflow, put the reverse cycle air conditioning on, or the ducted heating, or whatever. Have, all this recirculated air. Not to mention we've got all the EMS from everything that's going on as well, the radiation, but that's flying around. But we've got plumbing inside, so there's going to be condensation. As I mentioned, those heaters, condensation, and we're sealing the homes. So we're creating breeding grounds for mold and toxicity in our homes. And so this is why it's so prevalent. What do? We look at the situation, we see how long the person's been exposed to mold. Are they still in a moldy situation? First thing I say to people is, great, you moved house. Did you take yourself and your pets and your kids and your furnishings and your clothes? People say yes. Congratulations, you took the mold with you. So mold doesn't need to stay in the house. Mold doesn't need to be cut out of the wall, bleached, whatever. It's still there. It's still sporing. You are only treating part of the problem. So mold toxicity recovery is a very long program, and it's very detailed, and we have to cover every single part of the exposure, the carrier, all of that. So there's mold in a nutshell. There are certain foods that exacerbate a mold toxicity issue. Some of those are things like peanuts, chocolate, coffee. Why? Because they are grown in hard pods, hard shells, that if a bit of rain gets in while they're growing, gets moldy, guess what? That's now in that bean. So there are certain foods that do progress the issue. Mushrooms can. Some mushrooms can be medicinal and fight mold, but a lot of the others contribute to it. So it's a very complex issue there.
All right, that's very helpful. So, I mean, one quick follow up to that. If people are in a they have to get rid of pretty much everything, right? I mean, like what's practical and what's not when addressing that? I mean, does everybody have to throw away their entire wardrobe and buy something new, or is there certain treatments, or what do you recommend, just in a nutshell, people do if they do have that opportunity to move house, and then what do they do during that time period if they have an issue with mold?
There are treatments that they can use. So I work with a company called Sanair here in Australia. They've produced some great natural mold treatments. I also use essential oils. So I don't think I've got one with me, but I actually have one that's called Mold Be Gone, and it's a blend of essential oils that my team have made, and they're 4 essential oils that, when combined in certain ratios, you diffuse them, you can put them on topically. These are safe to ingest as well. And so we can fight mold from within you, from around you, and, diffuse that in your wardrobe before you pack your clothes. There's a simple thing. Do you want to be going and buying new clothes? The answer is no. And the reason is, first of all, it's expensive. And second of all, most new clothes, in fact, all new clothes, are sprayed with fungicide. before they're put on the shelves or in the bags or in the boxes or whatever. And that happens because materials can get damp. Materials can harbor mold, right? And mold is a fungus. So when you buy a new top or whatever it is, wash it a few times before you wear it. Get the fungicide off it. So please don't go rushing out buying a new wardrobe and then put new clothes straight on, because now you're just going to toxify yourself. So
And
there's mold.
there's also organic clothing too. They're somewhat affordable. There's I won't mention companies by name, but most of my clothes are organic now that I have. So the other thing is, I have to give another shout out to Denmark. They have a national pastime almost of airing out. So it's this notion of opening all the windows and doors to get rid of the excess humidity, get the air flowing in. And I just noticed it seems easier to breathe too if there's a little bit of natural airflow going in. Okay, so the other thing I mentioned was the lymphatic system. I don't know much about it. I know some practitioners use lymphatic draining. What's the importance of this, and what do you recommend people, maybe if they have lymphatic issues, or just good lymphatic health in general?
Yeah. The lymphatic system. I love this system. And I didn't even know about this system until I found out I had a problem with it. And, don't feel bad if you don't know what it is, because in the USA, I think it was back in 2015, a survey was done of all doctors and nurses in the allopathic medicine model. And they were asked, what lymphatic system, what it is, what it does, what it means, and 0.075% knew about the lymphatic system. So if you're going, I've never heard of this before, don't feel bad. You're already ahead of a lot of people, okay? So the lymphatic system is a collection of nodes, junctions, connectors, and vessels, and this is known as the lymphatic system. It's a system that sits just under your skin. So I want you to imagine a set of earphones, say for your mobile phone. Okay, and they're the old ones with the wires, because we don't want to be using AirPods, and that's a whole nother podcast in itself, that radiation. But these ones have wires. Now, I don't know, you drop them and you get it stuck under something and one wire breaks. Do the headphones work? Yes. Are they in stereo? No, they're now mono, but they're still working. This is how your lymphatic and circulatory systems work together. So where you have a vein or an artery, you have a lymphatic node or a vessel or a junction or a connector somewhere near it. And they work together like those two wires. Break one, the other one's still going to work. It's not going to work as well. Wreck one, like put a bump in it, it's going to affect the next one. Okay? So this is how it works. Now, the difference between the circulatory system and the lymphatic system is the circulatory system has a pump, and it's the heart. The lymphatic system does not have a pump, but you can move it by moving. So going for a walk. It doesn't have to be a run. It can just be a walk, jumping on the spot on your toes, bouncing, doing calf bouncing. This can move it. Waving your arms around, this can move it. Doing light brushing on the skin, doesn't have to be heavy. This can move it. Okay, so there are a lot of things to move the lymphatic system. Why is this important? We mentioned toxicity earlier on in this podcast, and a lymphatic system removes that toxicity. It removes the excess hormones, the excess sugars, the excess enzymes, the excess everything, fluid, right? Waste, anything. Its job is to move that and circulate it till it can find a point to help excrete it through the excretory system. It could be sweating, it could be peeing, it could be pooping, it could be anything, okay? Breathing. It could be any way that we need to get rid of waste, but the lymphatic system is the transport system for that. What happens when we have a surgery or we have an injury is we can get a thing called lymphedema, which is what this is, post-surgery lymphedema. We can get lipodema, which is fat deposits. Could, have a beautifully skinny arm and then you've got this like lump on it and you just don't know what it is. It's not always a cyst, it's not always a cancer. Sometimes it's just a deposit of fat. And if you have a lymphatic system that's not working, it's depositing fat. And you can have lipolymphedema, which is both together, which is very nasty. And so we really need to comprehend what it is that lymphatic system does. It transports waste. How can you love your lymph? You can be gentle with your body. And it sounds really weird and kooky, but pat yourself every now and then. Go through. I do this in the car a lot because I know that I'm blocked here. So I will pat myself and drain it. Anything from the collarbone up, you want to drain down. And anything from the collarbone down, you want to drain up towards the heart. Remember I said it doesn't have its own pump, but it works right alongside the circulatory system, and the heart is the pump for that. So love your lymph, be kind to yourself, give yourself a pat every now and then, not just on the back, but everywhere, and move your lymph.
Well, beautiful, Magic. Thank you so much for your time today. Is there any kind of message you'd like to leave folks with? And then also mention any projects you have going on, what you've got going on at your website, how people can find you online and in real life, anything else you'd like to leave folks with?
I just want to leave folks with, first of all, a phrase. And, I've had to learn about this myself. We mentioned right at the outset, who is magic? And I said I had to do a lot of learning to find that out. Your past mistakes do not define you. Please remember that. You are not what you did when you were a teenager. You are not even what you did 10 minutes ago. Okay? What you do now matters. Those steps forward really matter. So there's that. Everything that we do is on our website, which is www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. Don't forget the AU. We are based in Australia, and it's holistic with a W. Now, there you will find our podcast links. You'll find all of our blogs, our articles. You'll find our shop with our essential oil range, like that. You will find all of our services. And you will find a thing called a root cause analysis. And I mentioned this earlier. It's our free call and we do it anywhere in the world. And, we may offer you a program to work with us with consultations after that. We may not. There's quite a few people that would go, listen, this is not right at the moment, but hey, here's what we found. Here's what you can do about it. Okay? So everything is on that website. www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. And I just want to say, if you are having issues with toxicity, with lymphatic stuff, anything like that, we have our functional liver and lifestyle detox on there as well. If you are more interested in the PNEI, we can link you up with our instructors course, our practitioner course, or we're taking on patients all the time. If you've just found that talk therapy is not working for you, let's work on root cause.
Beautiful, Magic, and may you all be blessed with the greatest optimal health for your own benefit and for the benefit of all beings everywhere. May all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free.